Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Challengers podcast. We continue our journey of listening to leaders who are driving transformations within their organizations. My name is Vikas Sharma, and I am super excited to introduce our guest for today, Vikas Tyagi. Vikas is a seasoned risk leader currently serving as Chief Credit Officer for Sallie Mae. Before that, he worked for 16 years with Citi, managing large risk teams within their consumer banking division. Vikas, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Vikas. I'm looking forward.
So, Vikas, my first question for you is there a book that you recommend to everyone, and then why does it resonate with you?
Actually, because I am an avid book reader. If I think about one book, it's really very difficult to call out one book. But if you really ask me to kind of pick up a book, it's Atomic Habits. I really like that book because it's a life-changing book, not for me, but I shared it with my kids also. And it really, when you're changing your lifestyle, when you're changing or you're trying to achieve some of your goals, we always think about a huge goal and what's the end goal versus the steps. And the Atomic Habits actually asks you to focus or gives you a plan to focus on one step at a time, and a small change every day leading to a bigger goal. So I think I would suggest that book. But again, there's another book which I cannot stop myself if I do not call it out. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's written by Chris Voss. He was a FBI hostage negotiator. And the book, we always try to relate that book with how do we negotiate, right, in various aspects of the life. He says that, you should be a good listener. Try to connect with the person whom you are negotiating emotionally. Give them a safe space. And again, I know he talks about, and that book had a huge impact on me. It really gives you or shapes your personality as a leader as well. How do you talk to people? How do you give a safe space? And that's what the book pivots on, that you provide, even in a very hostile environment. If you're talking with a negotiating, even in the hostage situations, you're creating a safe space where that person starts sharing what their needs are. And once you know those needs and you connect with them, you can really create a very good outcome for everyone. And I think that, you try it out in your office, you try it out in your family. You always have, in your family situations with your kids, your wife, you really, have a lot of situations where you really want to understand where they want to be and what they need to achieve. And instead of negotiating things with them, you try to kind of understand, listen, mirror them. There are a lot of techniques he talks about, mirroring and paneling and listening more. Start with a no, connect emotionally, not logically, and that really helped me. And so I will suggest these two books. I know you asked for one, but I couldn't stop myself if I cannot share the other one.
I think these are very, very powerful books, and I love the point that you highlighted about listening more. Because on a similar vein, is there a quote or philosophy that you live by?
Yeah, because I think my life has been shaped by some changes, and I'll talk more about it. But and there are always decisions that are very tough decisions you have to make. But I think when I was reading a book where there was a very important thing which I read about, and they quoted it. I do not remember that book, but that quote or that word, right, during the Roman Empire time, when the Roman soldiers were going and invading all the other islands, they used to land on those islands and they used to burn their boats, because they used to say there's only one option now to win. There's no option to go back. And I think that's what really has worked for me as I made some life, changes. And first 6 months are always very tough, where you really curse yourself whenever you make a change or you push yourself to a different level, and you really want to go back into your comfort level. And that's where you think about those quotes and say, okay, no, there's no choice to go back. You really need to keep moving forward. And once you are through 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, you really start enjoying and you get into the groove. So that's what I would share, right? There's no looking back once you've made a decision. Just try to make the most out of it.
And going all in. I love that. And then the last question here, what is your favorite way to spend a day off?
Yeah, I mean, again, the best, most relaxing way to spend my day off is, sitting in my family room with some good TV show. Me, my kids have agreed on, created and agreed on, and a good spread of food. And then you spend the lazy kind of an afternoon talking, watching movie, discussing, laughing. I think that's what we enjoy. We always, now as the kids are getting out of home. So these are the rare. Otherwise, we used to do every Friday, because the Friday evening you sit together, you good food, good movie, and you relax and you enjoy.
But this is super helpful because hope you are now warmed up for our set of three themes. The first one is powering through challenges, and actually you have talked about this also recently because you have had a very interesting journey, right? You actually started your career in shipping and then came to banking. I'm very, very excited to hear about like what drove those big pivots and how did you manage these big changes?
Yeah, and because that's I did talk about the Roman Empire thing, right? That it really relates to that as well. I did. I was doing very well in my shipping industry. I became chief engineer, and then I was picked up by one of the owners. They wanted to go for an IPO, which really exposed me to the financial world. Otherwise, it was a very technical job. As a chief engineer on the ships, you are kind of deeply immersed in all the technical things, right? All sorts of engines, electronics, electricals, civil, all sorts of engineerings kind of come in at play when you are a chief engineer. And being 6,000 miles away from any land or any support, you're on your own. And that really gives you a very meaningful way of what you've studied to apply. It's fulfilling. And I was enjoying every bit of it unless I got married and I had my son. It was becoming very difficult to kind of manage both family and my sailing because I was out for 4, 5, 6 months. And initially, right, my wife and my son sailed with me, which was really good, but I knew that that's not going to happen. So that's why, I got into the shore job. And the owner was trying to pick up, go for an IPO, and they wanted to have an asset base. They wanted some technical hand who can assess the ships, come back, put a price on them. As it's a very capital intensive industry. And ship $60 to $100 million, and you spend millions of dollars on running those ships on a daily basis. Running and maintenance and the cost of the ship is a very important piece. And I had a lot of experience having sailed for 14 years and worked on at all levels. It gave me a really, really very good insight into it. But my personal life was still kind of even worse. Right before you would go on a ship, you would stay there for 6 weeks, 6 months. Or 4 months. Here, I was living out of a suitcase as I was inspecting ships. I was traveling all around the world, and I would get a call. You get onto a plane, you got to go to that port, you go onto that ship, sail for a few days, 2, 3, 4, 5 some days. Some days you stay there in the port for 3 days, come back into the hotel, and then fly again. And every 6 weeks you come back to the headquarters, which was in Gentofte, Denmark. And then you go for a pitch, whether you want to make a deal or not. It probably continued for 2 years, and then we went for a very successful IPO. I really enjoyed doing that as well because being technical, looking at multiple types of ships. And then I think the job turned around and they said, now we have to integrate all those ships. The fleet size had doubled, and they wanted me to go and audit all those ships. That was a little bit challenging. I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, and when I started asking around, they said, you have finance background. Otherwise, you'll not be able to get into the M&A world. That's where I wrote GMAT, came back to US, did my MBA, kept on trying going back to the shipping world and the mergers and acquisition. That probably had slowed down a little bit. Anyone and everyone I reached out to, they wanted me to come back as a technical director versus an M&A. So I said, this is not, it's going to help me if I really want to do what I was doing. Then why to do MBA from US? I did my internship in Sallie Mae. I don't know how many people know that, but I did my internship in Sallie Mae. Sallie Mae, people call me a boomerang as I went back after Citi. And that gave me some exposure into financial services. And then Citi job came in as a management associate, 2 years rotation. It was a very difficult decision for me to make because one side I had to make that decision for my family. And the other side, if I go back to the people who mentored me or who I used to look up to, they always said that, you're making a mistake, right? It's always to be a old hand and a young man versus a young hand and an old man. I was really looking forward to make a switch, and I had to make this tough decision to put a reset button and restarted. Joined as a management associate at the bottom of the run. It was very difficult first 6-8 months, and as I told you, right, I really cursed myself. And it was very easy for me to go back to the shipping world because people were even when I got the Citi job, They wanted to do my background check, and the company I worked with, V-Ships, I reached out to CEO because the background check they wanted some contact, and that person, as soon as he knew about me, he came back to me and he said, "Why are you going there?" And he wanted someone to fly from Texas to come and talk to me in Maryland, have a cup of coffee, to convince me, and I said no. I've made a decision. It was really tough, and as soon as I joined Citi or rotation program in 2006 or 2007, the recession started happening, right? And it was really, really a challenging world. And I've always wanted to be in the finance that interested me. And then some of the people I got exposure to during the Citi rotation, they said, no, you're getting into the recession. The place you need to be is in risk. Right? And because that's the fastest way to learn, and there'll be no stone left unturned. And I think I took that advice, really worked very well for me. And here I am, 16, 17 years later, being a credit person.
So with that, we'll jump into our next theme, because this is around dealing with disruptions. And I think there's no better person to ask this question than a risk manager who has managed multiple recessions. And I think, are there things that stood out from these experiences for you, Vikas?
Yes, because I think the decision making is very important, right? And one lesson I learned was, someone was worried when I was pushed into, which was bigger than me, and I was not even thinking about it. And some of my managers or mentors, kind of tapped on my shoulder and said, "Go there, do this." I think one thing which really resonated very well with me and has helped me is, when you're making the decision, right, always look at the information available. What are you missing? Is there any other information if you get would change your decision? And finally, when you make a decision, don't make any decision in the influence of your surroundings, your managers, your business, or if anyone is influencing you, you sleep on it. The one thing which one of my mentors told me was that, imagine you're standing alone and you are defending this decision alone without anyone's support, would you still make that decision? And really, because that helped me a lot, because then one thing, if I do not know any information, when you play that in your mind, you start looking for missing information, because you want to make that decision versus someone else is pushing you to make that decision. Number two, you'll be able to better defend it in front of, usually being in credit, you've been working in this field for long enough. You have to deal with multiple parties, right? With different outcomes, but all good ones, right? And, the product team and the marketing teams and owners, they really want to make sure that they grow the business. On the other side, you deal with second line, you deal with regulators, which really want to understand why are you growing, what makes you comfortable. And I think that's where you take a step back. And I always give this advice to credit risk managers, that if you are creating multiple versions of story for multiple stakeholders, that means you're doing something wrong. If you're keeping the story same and you feel comfortable going and talking to your product and PLNers at the same time, second line and regulators, that means you're walking a fine line. It's a fine line to walk. There is no crystal ball. There is no right or wrong. I think what I've learned is the regulators also want to understand, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what risks you're taking? Do you have a plan to mitigate it? If it goes wrong, where to pivot, what to monitor? And I think that increases your credibility, gives them a lot of confidence. And both sides, right? If you are able to deal with your regulators and have that credibility with them, the product and the P&L managers also try to rely on you and believe in you, because you know that you can steer the ship. I always give analogies from the shipping world. You have to steer the ship through the bad weather.
This is very interesting, because and I think it's a good point to ask this question, right? There's a lot of chatter in the market today around lofty AI valuations. Some people talk about, are we close to a recession? And then on the other hand, when you look at the US economy, it has had one of the best GDP growth in a quarter, just in the recent quarter itself. So what do you think? Are we close to a recession in near future, or it's 2026 is going to be a great growth year?
Yeah, I would not say, Vikas, that it would be a great growth year, but I do not believe that it will be a recessionary year. The reason why I say this is that, talk about AI, or I call it information highway. or information overload. There's a lot of information available to everyone, right? The policymakers as well as the consumers. When I look at the macro variables, right, if you look at your yield curves, right, they are in positive but very close to zero. That means people are managing, it's choppy waters, lot of sensitivity is there, but still not kind of dipping too low. When you start thinking about unemployment rate, right, that's where you see there is some resetting happening, but labor market is choppy, but still holding strong. Not strong, but holding steady, I would say. If you think about 2025 is the biggest year after 2007, 2008 time frame where corporate world has come and laid off a lot of people. And that's one thing, right? It was, in November when I was looking at it last, it was around 1.1 million jobs lost. I look at it slightly different, right? Because I think when COVID was a life-changing event which happened in a lot of ways. It kind of invented the digital world. And I think every company jumped into creating new products or getting more digital access. And I think we overhired. There was a lot of liquidity in the market. We overhired. A lot of companies overhired. Now I think the people are resetting back and they are trying to kind of make sure that now we are setting it back to the new normal where it should be. And that's why probably some of the jobs are being cut down. I think it is more of a cost cutting than AI impact. Definitely, there will be an AI impact, but looking at my own world, looking at the people I talk to, I haven't seen that AI has taken over completely. Not saying that it will not, it is going to take. I think it is the skill sets will start changing. Again, coming back to the recession, I would say 2026 would be a very important year to watch. I have not seen any indications. I know the delinquencies are at a higher level, but there is no spikes or there is no place where I can put my finger and say this is going to go bad. Right? If I look at last 2 quarters, and I do follow, there is a consumer survey which is published every month. The inflation is kind of thinking about the probability of inflation going up has come down. Probability of unemployment rate going up has come down in last 2 quarters. The average salary going up has gone up slightly. But, when you look at the fourth indicator, it says the people missing their minimum payment would also go high. And that's where I think when I put it all together, it will probably be a little bit overspending and consumerism which is happening and creating some stress versus a financial stress which is happening in the system. And I think that has to balance it out, right, from that perspective. And being in student loan industry, I also follow recent graduate unemployment rate. That has also gone up slightly. And I think the reason there again is that there is so many people who've been laid off, overhired, they have some experience. For the entry positions, you are getting people who have experience. Why not? If I get a person from a college or for a person who has 3 years experience, I would definitely hire a person who has a 3 years experience. So I think in 2026, we will see that this will kind of balance out. And kind of the both ends will meet together and it'll get to a steady state, which is probably a pre-pandemic normal.
This is super interesting and super insightful as well, Vikas. With that, we'll jump to our next theme, which is about bold predictions. And we talked about none of us have a crystal ball, but still, if you had to pick a bet, if you had to highlight there's one trend that you believe will have a big change on the banking industry in near future, what would it be?
Yeah, because I talked about the information available, right? I think the Googles of the world have now converted into the chatbots and the chat GPTs and the AIs of the world. And that information available both from a policymakers and to the regulators and the consumer would change the way we do business. Don't take me wrong, the fundamentals would always remain the same. Right, and you have to be standing on your 2 feet on those fundamentals, right, on the credit. And I'm primarily talking about credit as that's my area to think about. But I think the way we do business, the way we create models, the way we understand our consumer, it's a behavioral modeling, right? It's a behavioral prediction, and that behavior is changing. And I think I see still a lot of places conventional wisdom is being used and not being overlaid, because it's a catch-22, right? The behavior has to change to come into your historical data to manipulate your models versus you start thinking ahead and say how the behavior is changing, how customer is kind of getting into a place where they are looking for a product and getting a connect. There's no brand loyalty anymore, right? The customer has so much of information about what's the best product, who's giving it, what value, what am I getting out of it. And I think that's where we probably think about how do we change that and start thinking about, I hate, when I talk about regulatory terms, I hate overlays, but in these ways I think we have to make those overlays on top of our conventional wisdom to see where is it going and kind of spend more time predicting that future. We do forecasting, we do all of those forward looking models, but I think that gone are those days where history is the best prediction of future because of this change which is happening in the outside world. You can call it AI interruption, you can call it anything. I think it is the information which is available very easily to everyone from all the stakeholders which play an equal and important part into a financial product.
Very interesting, Vikas. So we already see that at least on the marketing side, SEOs giving ways to AEOs, and I think this is also very, very interesting on how that's going to change the risk behavior as well. And I think what are some of the things we have to be looking out for. Very, very interesting theme, Vikas. With that, Vikas, we are coming towards the end of our podcast. Is there any advice that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the only thing which I would say is that be aware about what's going on. And again, I keep giving advice on the credit side because that's where I think in the financial industry, if you talk about where I've spent the later part of my life, where the rubber meets the road, right? And it's a very important function. To any credit risk managers, my advice would be to understand what the profitability metrics are and how risk kind of fits into it. We can always cut down all the risk and have no profits and kill the business versus drawing a balance, how much risk we can take. So be aware of the surroundings, what's going on, humble and stick to the fundamentals.
Absolutely. Because actually, those are some of the things I'm going to take away from this podcast. First is definitely sticking to fundamentals because at the end of it, I think a lot of things can be explained just through that. Keep things simple. I also like the part about when you mentioned about basically having a well-rounded view, getting all stakeholders along as well, because everybody is adding their own unique perspective to the problem. And once you listen to everyone, once you take into account their views, you will always reach at a better solution. And then I think the third thing is always be a learner. I think as we talked about, our industry is changing fundamentally. A lot of things for us to learn, and then just being aware of how those things are going to shape our future and then being ready for those. I think those are going to be great learnings for our audience as well. I'm pretty sure they will have their own set of learnings as well. But with that, Vikas, I want to pause here. First of all, a big thanks to you for making time available for us and for our audience as well. Please follow Vikas on LinkedIn. He shares his experiences and then also a lot of interesting stuff that he posts around what's happening in the industry. So we look forward to that, Vikas. And with that, I'll pause here. Thanks a lot for your time today, Vikas.
Thank you, Vikas, and thanks for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.